I'm an artist, afraid of color. Here's a bunch of my art from over the years. It doesn't matter if they're simply rough sketches or rendered studies, my art just never has color in it. It's because I don't have any confidence when it comes to using color in my art. This lack of confidence has led me to avoid color altogether and has resulted in a really bad habit. And it's a habit that I didn't even realize I had created for myself. My usual workflow starts with a rough sketch into a cleaner sketch, and then finally some black and white rendering. This kind of workflow is fine, there's nothing wrong with it, but I do want the option of going straight into color without glazing over a black and white rendering with color. I'm sure some of you can relate to this, but there will be times when I see amazing art online, like all over social media, and the colors just seem to come alive. So I'll feel super inspired, head over to Procreate or Photoshop and throw some color down, only to end up with something that looks so muddy and flat, or something overly saturated and busy, like there's never any in between. But it's 2025, and it's time to get out of my comfort zone with art. I can't just stay away from color forever. So, I'm going to attempt to begin the breaking of this bad habit that I've created for myself. I'll be attempting this with the help of a special little art book. Then we'll get into some color studies, which I'm hoping will be a good time. Even though, yes, I am worried about how they'll turn out. Color Choices by Stephen Quiller is a book that I believe will help me become a better artist. Let me read a little piece from the back of the book really quickly for you. A personal color sense is a wonderful asset. It enables an artist to express subtle shades of feeling through color, to apply just the right hue intuitively. If you, like most other people, wish you could use color more effectively, Color Choices is for you. Sold. That excerpt sold me on this book. It wasn't until recently that I began playing around with color in my art, but I do so unsure of myself and the colors I'm choosing. You might have seen my last video where I was painting using color, but I was using a color palette to paint the skin. I don't want to rely on color palettes for my color choices. I want to be able to apply colors intuitively and confidently. Look at this guy's art. The cover, for example, is gorgeous. From the cover art alone, you can tell this guy knows what he's doing with color. The cover gives off this golden hour feeling full of warmth, evoking a sense of tranquility, a sense of awe, and maybe even nostalgia for some people. If we go to another art piece of his, like this one, it's obviously very different from the first one, with this one being more childlike, playful with the colors, leaning into fantasy and a sense of whimsicalness. This one's definitely, it pushes away from realism. And it doesn't matter which art piece of his we look at, the colors are always just so fun, bold, engaging. Like, if I could paint like this dude paints with color, I would never go back to black and white rendering. There would almost be no point. This book is for artists of all different mediums, but I do think that traditional painters would benefit the most from this book, because it does have a section where it talks about different paint manufacturers and like the differences between cobalt turquoise and permanent red and cadmium red. And it does have a section where it talks about mixing colors in a very physical way that I don't think digital artists would really find too useful. However, the fundamentals of hue, saturation, value, those of course translate across all different mediums. My favorite thing about this book was the section about the different color schemes, which is basically the point of this video. Reading about the color schemes wasn't enough for me. I had to practice them for myself. And I want to explore the color schemes in depth in this video, along with probably the next couple videos of mine. And I will start with the easiest color scheme of them all, which is the Monochromatic Color Scheme. The book defines the monochromatic color scheme as a one-color color scheme. You choose a hue, then play with its value and saturation levels across the entire artwork. For example, let's take red. This will be our one color, or one hue. Then we experiment with its value, making it lighter or darker, and we can play with its saturation, making it more or less vibrant. Sounds easy, but how easy is it to put into practice? So I'm in Photoshop, and I have my image already sketched and masked out. I masked out the different elements on Procreate to make the painting process easier and faster for the sake of this video. I gave myself 20 minutes for each of the 6 color studies. I absolutely had to give myself a time limit, or else I would have worked on them forever. So in this first color study, I'm trying to stick relatively close to the values of the original reference image. I found the reference on Pixabay, by the way, just for the record. Shout out to Pixabay. Anyway, I'm using solid white to attract the eye. So the lighthouse and house area is meant to be the focal point of this painting. The rest of the image should have a small value range and a small saturation range, as I don't want these areas to detract from the intended focal area. The clouds have a good amount of contrast of their own, which can lead the eye to that area, but I end up smudging a lot of the cloud's edges in the end to help draw the eye back towards the lighthouse area, which has a lot of sharper edges. Edges are another huge factor in leading the eye where you want it to go. In this second painting, I tried to stay away from using overly saturated blues. In the first painting, I used strong saturated blues on the roofs of the houses and in parts of the lighthouse. I tried to stay away from that this time around and opted for a more muted painting overall, focusing more on bolder values instead. It wasn't intentional, but the bolder values ended up being in the cloud area, so I guess the focal point of this painting will be the clouds, since they have the strongest concentration of darks and lights. This painting really taught me how useful gray can be. I've read so many art books that have mentioned how gray is often undervalued in art because people go for saturated colors instead. But if you use too many saturated colors, especially next to each other, they can really overwhelm the painting so fast. I do like this painting though. It gives off this calm after a storm feel to me. Alright, now this third study, y'all, this third painting, it's my favorite one. I stuck to lighter values, so it became an almost pastel type of painting. I used a good amount of saturated blues as well. Now, light values and saturated colors often gives a painting a dreamlike feel to me, and that's the sense that this third study gives me. I feel like I just stepped into Narnia when I look at this painting. Mind you, I've never seen those movies, but still, the painting feels otherworldly to me. The lighthouse area is full of light, saturated blues, with the sky being a less saturated blue. And this less saturated blue gives the eye a place to rest. The clouds end up being the lightest part of this third painting, and they turn out so fluffy looking in the end that I think serves the lighthouse area by making it pop forward a bit. This painting felt really easy to do too. Limiting the value range should feel constricting, but it actually feels freeing to me. Now this fourth study was a bit tricky. I'm still not sure how I feel about it. Maybe it has something to do with coming right after the third study and how much I like that one, but basically I didn't want any strong contrast in this fourth study. I didn't want strong values and I didn't want strong saturation, so I stayed away from dark darks, strong lights, and intense blues. So the lighthouse area, the sky, and the body of water end up being the most saturated while still being very muted. The clouds and land areas are even less vibrant. This lack of contrast could really make a painting look flat. However, I still think there's enough value difference to make each element look separate from one another. The end result is a very neutral looking painting. The more I look at it, the more I like it. It gives me this creepy, unsettling feeling, and I think that has something to do with the eye not really knowing where to look, since the contrast is rather weak. I did add light areas to a few windows here and there to ensure the painting wasn't completely flat. Before I started any of the color studies, I knew I wanted to do a nighttime scene for one of them, and this fifth painting ended up being that nighttime scene. The sky is pure black, with the clouds and body of water pretty much blending into one another, neither having strong values or saturation levels. I didn't place any strong blues in the lighthouse area, but this area becomes the focal point later on when I add a light to the lighthouse. This is probably the best time to admit that I don't know how lighthouses emit their light, so I'm totally sorry to any lighthouse enthusiasts out there if the light is not completely accurate. I'm just having fun here. It's a learning experience after all, and across all 6 studies that I completed for this video, I definitely feel like I learned a lot about color, but I also feel like I learned a lot about composition, surprisingly. The clouds are rather flat here, with a small value range since it is a nighttime scene, and I didn't want them to stand out too much. The strong white of the lighthouse and the white of the window are meant to draw the eye, as they are both the lightest values in this study. In this final study, I knew I wanted to play around with high saturation. Most of the other studies didn't have a lot of high saturation across the entire painting, so in this 6th study, I placed high saturated blues pretty much everywhere. The clouds and water are both the same saturated blue, with the clouds having a wider value range, making them pop more, especially in the end when I add bright white to them. The house in the front ends up standing out among the other houses behind it, since the houses in the back have darker values than the white house in the front. I do like how this one turned out. The high saturation makes the painting feel lively and fun. Honestly, I'm really happy with how all of the color studies turned out. I can see why working with a monochromatic color scheme would be the easiest for those who are new to color. I still have such a long way to go with building confidence with color, but this is a great start, and I'm actually looking forward to playing around with the next color scheme. Here are all of the studies, and I think I did okay, especially since I only gave myself 20 minutes per study. Now, the question is, how will I handle the complementary color scheme?